Yeah, I
Man.
feel like I'm oversaturating the airwaves here.
No, I don't think so. Matter of fact, the fact that you have a Three Principles T-shirt lets me know that you're really serious today about speaking principles. So that's good.
I
What
am
is that? What
really.
is that shirt?
This is from my European tour of 2014, and it was Julian Freeman had this crazy idea that I should do up a T-shirt like a rock and roll tour for this tour, and I thought it was the worst idea I had ever heard. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, whoa, that's a really interesting idea. It would be like just for laughs, you know? And so I had this shirt printed up, and I don't know if you can see if you can see that.
Yeah, wisdom, love,
Yeah, this
peace.
is,
Oh, that's from your book. That little
yeah,
temperature.
yeah. And so on the back, I will spare you taking my shirt off to show you. Um, on the back is a listing of everybody who put me up in all the different places I went on the tour. So that's what that was all about.
How cool! That is so. That's really awesome. That's really awesome.
It is cool, Amir, but really, if you come right down to it, it's that Red Sox baseball hat that's really putting me over the edge.
Oh, is that what's going on? Oh no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll work on that.
Yeah.
What are
No,
you?
that's awesome. Are
You
you kidding me? We're Boston people, right,
Oh,
Jack?
oh,
that's right. You're
okay.
Boston.
Right.
That's right. You guys are
That's
both
right.
Boston people. That's right.
That's right.
All right. Well, what are we going to do today? Well, for those that don't know Jack Pransky, at this point, I think, like you said, I think everyone knows who you are. And you know,
That is,
today's talk, and just for those that don't know, Jack's been around the principles for a very long time. I would consider him um, one of the main teachers, if not also a historian of the principles. Paradigm shift was a little bit different. That was basically the kind of the fruition of the principles, if I believe, right? How would you explain like paradigm shift?
I would explain that as the history
Yeah,
of how it came to be out in the world.
there you go. Yes, Terry, I will be sharing. I'm recording it right now. And this. So just to give you guys a background, me and Jack got on a call a couple days ago, and there's been talks, and I've heard this before about that psychologists have taken the understanding and dwindled it down to what used to be a spiritual essence and made it into a psychological essence. And by doing that, some of the stuff that Sid may have been teaching has now been diluted because it was now turned into a structure. And Jack actually had, I let him kind of unpack that, and it was actually rather brilliant. And instead of me and him having a private conversation, I thought, you know what? I think this has to also be heard by our community, just to kind of give it a fair shake, so to speak. So, Jack, first of all, welcome for being on here. But going to what we were talking about, and I'm just going to jump right in because I think this is how we should do it. Is in what you've heard, and I know that when Sid originally spoke, it was very spiritual. A lot of speak about God, and a lot of speaking about um, a lot of the stuff that was said before the three principles sounded a lot different than when we hear the three principles now, from my understanding. And I want to know if that's true. And secondly, why did the three principles come to fruition? And was it because of the psychologists, or was it because it was useful, or what? Could you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there, Amir.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. I was trying to put my head wrapped around myself. So
um, where to start?
okay, let's start with this. When Sid started to speak originally, was it different than what it is today, would you say?
Yes and no.
Okay. That's a Jack Pransky answer, by the way. Let's see.
The three principles were always embedded in what he was talking about. They were not specified. You can listen to his old tapes. You can read the original books that Linda Quiring had written, which were his words. And you can see the three principles all over the place in his books. That's all he was talking about. He didn't specify them as three principles then. That doesn't mean they weren't there. They were everywhere in what he was talking about. Now, Linda described on that last call with David Banks how Sid first, came up with three principles. And I don't want to repeat that story, but it was a long time before a psychologist showed up on the island. But he didn't really, he still was speaking very spiritually, and not on his tapes anyway, because I wasn't involved then. I don't know this story firsthand. So he was basically still talking the way that he was talking. When the psychologists showed up, Roger Mills and George Pransky, he was still talking spiritual. And when they started to catch on, when they started to have big insights that changed their life, and they believed that they could turn what Sid was talking about into a psychology, Sid believed that this would be best to go out through psychology for some reason. I mean, George says in Paradigm Shift, in the interview that I did with him, oh, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but George just had heart bypass surgery yesterday.
No.
And today, the operation was very successful, and he's fine. So I just wanted to say that to everybody, just in case any rumors are afloat. So at some point, George and Roger sat down with Sid, and they started to try to come up with ways to express the spiritual in psychological terms. Now, even then, there wasn't talk about three principles. And George and Roger, went off in their separate directions, and they took it in whatever way that they could. Oh, I should say, by the way, the reason Sid ended up thinking that it would be best to go out through psychology is because him talking spiritual could only reach so many people. And he knew it was the same thing. Whether he talked psychological or whether he talked spiritual, it was the same thing. But he had a very limited audience, especially at the beginning. He had a bunch of hippies that were listening to him on Salt Spring Island. And when the psychologist showed up, it was like it gave Sid an opportunity to do what you could say his heart always wanted to do, was to be helpful to humanity. Now, suddenly, the world of psychology opened up before him. As I said before, it was just a small group of people who were surrounding him on Salt Spring Island. Now, there's a whole new world that opens up. So how do you express that in a way that is palatable to the world of psychology? Especially at that time, it certainly wasn't talking spiritual. it wasn't until the American Psychological Association came up, like the idea of how can we get the APA, American Psychological Association, to accept this as a psychology. And suddenly the whole notion of talking spiritual became verboten. Because back in those days, there wasn't any talk of spiritual psychology. And I don't actually know the dates of this, but I'm not sure even transpersonal psychology had developed yet at that time. I'm not totally sure about that, what the dates were, but it certainly wasn't accepted by the APA at that time. So, but something happened in between those two things that I was talking about. The psychologists getting involved, talk about the APA. The thing that happened in between was this guy, Rick Suarez, got involved through Keith Blevins, actually. And he was a great conceptualizer, you could say. So he was the main person who took what Sid was talking about and turned it into conceptually how it would be used in psychology. And he came up with 4 principles. So one day, the story goes that somebody asked Sid about what the 4 principles were. He said, "What 4 principles?" He said, "There aren't 4 principles. There are 3 principles, and they're mind, consciousness, and thought." And he just pulled the plug on what Rick Suarez was doing, because he thought, this is off base. Great intentions to bring it to the world of psychology, off base. So just before I came into this, so maybe around 1990 or so, I came in 1991. Sid puts out a tape that for the first time, the tape talked about 3 principles. But when he was talking about it at that time, he was talking about it so universally, so spiritually, even though he wasn't saying spiritual, that I couldn't make heads or tails out of what he was talking about. And that was because he was putting that out for the people who were now teaching this understanding, to kind of get them refocused. You know, before that, it was almost like everybody to themselves. You know, you go out and put it out the way that you really feel like it's best to be put out. But then and I'm not sure of the exact timing of this, but it's in Paradigm Shift somewhere, is when the idea for the getting it approved by the American Psychological Association came up. It then became a faculty had to be developed. So there was at that time it was called Psychology of Mind. So a Psychology of Mind faculty came into being. And then when the Psychology of Mind faculty came into being, at some point along the way, and it was to give, to give credence for the American Psychological Association. Maybe they started meeting before that, I'm not sure. But when they started talking about what they had in common, out of that came these things called concepts. And everybody at that time, if you wanted to get on board, you had to start teaching these concepts. And some courses got developed, like the core courses and whatever, based around these concepts. And then the same thing happened with the concepts that happened with the 4 principles. Somebody asked Sid about the concepts, and Sid said, "What concepts?" And then he pretty much pulled the plug on the concepts. Now, the concepts were developed to help people understand the 3 principles at that time, but they really kind of got people off the scent. People started focusing more on the concepts than on the principles. And it wasn't until the concepts had to disappear from everybody's mind that people were forced to focus on 3 principles are what creates everybody's experience of life moment to moment. That, to me, is the brilliance of what Sid was talking about and what sets him apart from the rest of the world in terms of great spiritual, enlightened people who talk pretty much the same type of thing. As soon as you have 3 principles, it boom, you see how it all works together. You can grasp it. It was impossible to grasp before. Let's put it this way. I don't know anybody, especially including myself, I don't know anybody that totally grasped what Sid was talking about before the 3 principles became the focus and came into play. I've talked too much.
No, I not only do I agree with you in my own experience, when we're talking privately, looking back, everything that I read in Buddhism, Zen, Christianity started to make sense in light of the 3 principles. So
Yeah.
I completely get what you're saying. And, it's been so long, I start to forget that, and then I get reminded when I look back, I go, if it wasn't for the 3 principles, that those 3 universal things that you're discussing, nothing. I mean, I would get glimpses. I would listen to Alan Watts, or I would read Alan Watts or Osho or Maharaj, all these guys, and I would say, how come they get this stuff, and why am I so ignorant? Why is it that they keep saying this brilliant stuff? And I look back, working at a recovery center, people start to say, how did you know to say that? And it's only because, in reference to the 3 principles, that I start to sound like the very people I started to read.
Those are enlightened people. Sid Banks had an enlightenment experience. He only talked what he saw. And he said very, very clearly, there are no words that can describe what I saw. So already, when it comes out of my mouth, it's already not truth, because it's already form. So it's a pointing to the formless. That's what the three principles are, pointing to the formless. You said in one of your cryptic, you had this byline, not for the title of this workshops, but the three principles don't exist, or something like that. You said something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe they don't exist. They exist. Universal mind, the energy behind all life, that exists. Consciousness, that exists. The power that we have to think, that exists. Now, I guess it's whatever you define exists as meaning. But to me, those things are very, very real. And they might just be metaphors to describe what's going on. But whatever they are, it is the way that the world really works. It's the truth of the way things really work. And the only way that people can see whether they're truth or not is to look inside themselves to see whether it's truth. Nobody should take anybody's word for it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that's exactly what I was pointing to. The three principles as a concept don't exist, but in the experience of living, you start to see them unfold. So in that respect, I absolutely agree with you. So that, and what I was pointing to is people are arguing the three principles as a concept, and I see that happening. That's what I see. What somebody just recently said, are the three principles then, if we boiled it down to three principles, are they now just considered tools? Is it just another methodology? And what would your answer be to that then? Is it just a helpful way to make sense of something? Then it's a tool, so to speak, or would you disagree with that?
The three principles are not tools. They're the way things are. You can't make it, you could use the three principles. Here's the amazing thing about it. You could use the three principles to create the three principles as tools. You'd be off base, but that's what we're doing. So we get this thought. The three principles are tools. That thought comes into our consciousness out of all the possibilities that exist within universal mind. And we come up with the three principles are tools. They're not tools. That's an illusion that the three principles are tools.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. We use the three principles, the capacity of the principles, and one of its capacities, we can make it look like a tool or make it look like whatever we want to. That's actually that's very profound, what you just said. That's one of its uses.
Yeah, we can use the three principles to create concepts. We can use the three principles to create four principles. We use the three principles to do everything. It doesn't mean that it's correct.
Yeah. Well, going to I don't know if this is in line, but one of the things I guess you can do with the three principles as well is and I saw that you and Gabrielle Maldonado, and I want to speak to that. You guys are doing something together. You're kind of you're going to retire soon. I didn't want to say, because I hate to say that you are going to, but is that true? You are going to retire soon? I'm
planning on retiring at the end of this year.
And I hope that's just a concept, one of the ways we can use it for principles. Hopefully that's something as well. But, one of the things that I've seen you wrote, or maybe Gabriella wrote, is the three principles cannot be taught step by step. Now, there are some teachers out there that are seeing that there may be a step-by-step way of teaching it, or and you mentioned it, I think that's what the psychologists tried to do in the past, was try to create a little plan to share it. But what do you see advantages, disadvantages? Does it work that way?
First of all, I don't think the psychologists did that.
Okay.
I don't think they tried to come up with a step-by-step thing. They always knew that people had to teach this in the way that makes the most sense for them.
Okay.
There's no step-by-step in this thing. Now there are, I totally believe that there are components, or I don't know what you call them. There are, when we're putting this out to others, there are certain things that we would be wise to put into place in order for it to be heard best. So the first one is we have to live the principles ourselves. We have to be in our health ourselves. We have to see life through the eyes of the three principles enough so that our life is affected enough so that we have something to give away to others. So it's walking the talk, it's living it. And even if our lives are totally messed up, if we're going through something like a bad experience, when we arrive in front of another person or in front of a group of people, we are like totally 100% there in our health. And then people who are sitting in front of us or who we're talking to come in with a lot on their mind. Their typical thinking. Everybody's bringing in their typical thinking. We need to help that thinking relax if we're going to say anything that ends up penetrating. Otherwise, it's just going to bounce off their typical thinking. So we want to do whatever we can do to get that thinking to relax. So their guard gets let down, or whatever you want to call it. So, that's why we build rapport. That's why we have fun with people. That's why we sit down with people like we're sitting with them in our living room or something. It's like the whole idea is to get the mind to relax so that people can hear. And then we want to go into deep, deep listening so that we hear the essence of what they're saying is the problem and what their what the solution is to the problem. It's all out there. It's all embedded in spiritual energy. It's all embedded in universal mind. Deep listening is listening so deeply that we're able to hear it. And then we want to be able to share what we have seen for ourselves, but in a way that they can hear it. That starts with where they're at and moves them along so they can hear something new, because they can see the way that it really works. But none of that stuff I mentioned means anything, because the only thing that counts is whether people have an insight or not. So I would say that putting those four things into place um, is what allows for the best chance of others having insights. But it's not a guarantee. And we might not do any of those things and somebody might have an insight. But I think wisdom would say that when we approach teaching or coaching or counseling or communicating, the three principles within that backdrop, it has a tendency to affect people the most. Or in communities, or in organizations. Same thing over and over and over and over again. Now, each one of those, there's an art to it. And the thing I'm doing with Gabriella is to help people go deeply into all of those different aspects of it, so that people, so that's what the mentorship is. So as my final gift to the community, we're gonna, well, I don't know if it's my final one or not, but we're putting this out as an opportunity for people who want to go through that with us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I do want to get the link to that if that's available. After this, I'll put it in the show notes as well as.
Great.
So I'll do that. And then, so from what I heard, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, then it's not a step-by-step plan, but these are containers that are needed to be in the conversation in order for a deeper conversation. So in other words, it can't be step-by-step, because with deep listening, you may give somebody a hug, and with that container that you bring in, there's an infinite ways that you can show up with that specific conversation. So a step-by-step would say, if Jack says something, I should ask you a question, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying if you listen deep enough, your wisdom will guide you to the next steps. So you can't have the step-by-step plan, because there's something before that that gives you the navigation, so to speak, tools to tell you what to do next, to the unfolding.
Well, wisdom, which really is the purest, this is the way that I see it, the purest aspect of universal mind coming into our pure consciousness. It's embedded within us. It's like a pipeline to universal mind. Even that's a misnomer, because we're all part of universal mind, but you know what I mean. So wisdom is always guiding us. We just get distracted from it most of the time. So wisdom would tell us whether it would be a wise thing to give somebody a hug, or whether they're going to punch us in the face as a result. I mean, so it's like that, and that's why techniques are not techniques go instantly to the outside in, because if you gave somebody a hug and it really worked, and you thought that's what needs to happen, is I need to give people hugs, it would be so far off base. The first one worked because it felt right. It felt right in the moment. And we can always tell by whether something is working or not. If somebody's eyes start glazing over, we know we're not in the right ballpark. If somebody starts arguing with you, we're not in the right ballpark. We got to take a step way back and listen deeper.
If anyone has a question or would like to raise your hand, would you be open to having people?
Absolutely.
I'm sure people want to expand on the stuff that you're saying. This has been absolutely so powerful for me. And we do have a hand raised. Helen, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Or you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello.
Helen, hi.
Hi, Jack. Thank you, Jack and Amir, for putting the call on today. So last week was Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, and I was just hearing you say something there, Jack, about being in your own health. I think you used the word health.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up for me the fact that I don't know whether, it doesn't matter whether I agree with that or not, but I think I can be of service when I can recognise I'm not in my own best version of health. If I'm listening deeply enough and connecting enough, it's not about me, so it's about them. Don't know what the question is really, but I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Well, whether we feel like we're in our health or not, we are always really in our health, because we can't get away from our spiritual essence. We can't get away from the pure consciousness within us. We are our health. Everybody sitting in front of us is their health. And when our health is able to connect to their health beyond the presenting behavior, presenting thinking, that's when magical things happen. So we're all in the same position. We are our clients, or we are our trainees, or we are the same as the community people we're working with. We all are this perfect health. And we inadvertently get in the way of realizing it, so that we walk around through life without knowing that we are. And that's why we search, because we don't know that we are. So when I say in our health, I'm meaning two things. I'm meaning the fact of it for everybody, and I'm meaning whether we are having an experience of it in any moment. And that happens either when all the rest of our thinking shuts down in a moment, and it's suddenly out there for everybody to see, or when we realize that we're just creating illusions that make it look like we're not our health. So I don't know whether that answers your question. I don't even know if you asked a question, but that's what occurred to me to say to that.
Yeah, I don't either know. I think so it's all around, you know, if showing up and connecting and being of service is your work, and then being able to take your whole self to work and not wanting to present a dual aspect of how things are, and also recognizing that I've noticed connection happen better. I've noticed a quicker connection with people if they see the truth in me as a facilitator,
Great, that's true.
Yeah. So I just think that just being, yeah. And I don't know, maybe I just, as you were speaking, I heard you, you know, I think it just links into that not feeling enough sometimes. And it's yeah, learning to trust that it doesn't really matter. Like you say, it's what happens in the moment, and how, yeah, going back to the letting go of that thinking and getting back to the deep listening.
See, we're always using the three principles, whether we know it or not, to come up with stuff about ourselves, about other people, about the way things should be. You know, just we're always using the three principles without knowing that we're using them. And then if we try to use them, we're in trouble, because there's no. That's another thing I want to speak to. I really think a lot of people have gotten, well, let's put it this way. The idea is off base to think that the three principles are a prescription to live a healthy life. We're not trying to get anyone anywhere. All we're trying to do, all we're doing, I should say, all we're doing is helping people see how it works. You know, we've been looking in this direction. I'll speak for myself. Before I bumped into Sid Banks, as far as I was concerned, life worked like this. I had my experience with Sid Banks. Suddenly I realized, whoa, life really works like this. I was totally off base, totally just wrong. And that shook me up. That shook up my world. And my life was never the same. Now, that wasn't the purpose for my life never to be the same. Sid was just showing me how it really worked. And even though I couldn't understand a word he was saying, something shifted in me. It's so easy to slide into in our teaching, coaching, counseling, whatever. We can help you, and you see this in marketing materials. I use the three principles to allow me to be driven crazy when I see this in marketing materials. It's like, it's almost like there's a promise out there that people can live a better life. We're just here to help people see how it works, period. If they happen to live a better life as a result of that, great. It's a byproduct. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Jack. Happy retirement. I don't think you ever will, but just to see your name brings me peace. I just wanted to share that with you. Just when I see your name written, it brings my thought to you, and it brings me peace. And thank you very much for that.
Appreciate it a lot.
Jack, thank you, Helen. You know, what I heard while you were speaking is if I get into an auto accident, my body is broken physically, but there's something inside of me that wants to fix every broken bone, every part of my body, all the muscles. There's something behind the brokenness that still is functioning in spite of what's happening to me. And when you're saying mental health, what I'm hearing is you can have broken thoughts, but the fact that you're having the capacity to even have a broken thought, that's the energy that's allowing you to have that anyway in the first place. Is that kind of what you're pointing to? It's not the actual thing that's happening, it's behind the thing. So when someone says they're broken, what's that energy that's giving you the ability to say that? When you say you're never going to be a good father, when you say that you're never going to be somebody, you're still using that energy. So you're actually working perfectly fine. Is that kind of what you're pointing to? That's what I at least heard.
That's true. What you just said is very true. At the same time, there's the formless mechanism, which is a contradiction in terms, of the three principles that are always operating to allow us to see the illusions that we create. Like the idea, I'm not a good father. That's an illusion. Now, it's an illusion that looks real. It's an illusion that feels real, but it's an illusion. How did that illusion get there? By the inadvertent use of the three principles. So both of those things at once, together, like the pathway is either one of those directions or both at the same time, ideally both at the same time. This energy that gives us everything and works perfectly within us, as you described better than I did, and the fact that we are creating illusions that look like reality, but that aren't really. But we would swear that they are.
So the difference then, than what the principles are than some other modalities of psychology, I would say, is then if I say I'm a no good father, some psychologies are trying to uncover the illusion. Why are you not a good father? What can we do to make you a better father? Is that what we aren't trying to point to in the principles where some modalities are pointing to? If that's the case, then some psychologies are trying to unpack something that doesn't exist in the first place, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I think that's, I hate to say this. I mean, because I don't want to say that's what psychology does, but that's the way that it comes out a lot. So the three principles are clearly saying, and this to me is what sets it apart from anything else. Your problems are illusions. And we are just the same as you. We do, we're all doing it. Some people create illusions that are darker than others. But we're all doing it. We're all doing the exact same thing. And it's really hard to get away from illusion in this world of form. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
We are illusion creators. That's what we do.
Beautiful. We're coming to the last 12 minutes of this call, and I still want to take it happens so fast for me. If anyone has any other, you have Jack on the line. This is your opportunity. I can still listen, go for the rest of the time, but I want to give an opportunity for anyone here. If anyone has any questions.
Wow, what a quiet group.
Rui, we have one. We have one. I think people are settling with what you're saying, so sometimes it's a good thing. Let me, Rui, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Jack. Can you hear me well?
Yes, thanks. Great to see you.
Yes. I'm driving, so there's a bit of noise in the background. Sometimes this is where I'm at the moment. So in terms of the principles, and I would like to have your insights on this. Is so when we explore that we will always feel our thinking, and whatever we will think, it will look real to us in the moment until we don't, and then it just changes. So do we call all that an illusion, or are we, because for me it makes sense if we say that it's all an illusion from that standpoint, but then it would be for everything I would think, regardless if it's good or bad, if it's helpful or not helpful.
That's true.
And that would mean that everything somebody would think ever would also be the same. So if the principles would be always in place and creating from that place, and that always puzzled me, because so why would Sid be different then?
Well,
Why would, I mean, he felt what he thought, for sure. It was really a strong feeling he got. He had a huge insight, but it's so isn't that still an illusion?
well, yes. However, um, we all have the capacity to see truth. We can, because truth is what operates, whether anybody can see it or not. We end up seeing truth at this level, 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 and all the way down. We see our truth. Even at the very lowest levels, we see our truth. Now, when it's really helpful to see life, to me, it's really helpful to see life in terms of levels of consciousness. Every time we get a thought, it comes into our consciousness at a certain level. And we look out at the world from that level. We get the feeling of that level, and we look out at the world from that level, and we see whatever we see, and we call it reality. Whatever we're calling reality is an illusion, because it's not the same for everybody. But if we're able to see at the highest, getting up there in high levels, the closer we are to seeing truth unencumbered. I'm not sure that we can, I've never had the experience of seeing truth completely unencumbered by the world of form, because I'm in the world of form. But when I heard Sid way, 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 way beyond my intellect, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, and this is the only thing I knew that he knew that he was speaking truth, or as close to it as one can possibly get. And that's what started to shift me. So I don't know whether I answered your question.
Yeah, and that's thanks for making the effort to bring me to how you do see, and where I kind of get lost, and that's where I drop it most of the times. It's because it's almost like the chasing, like the who comes first, right? And if we always conceptualize everything, and then truth could also be another idea that we put in front of us to, and we make sense of. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the concept of truth makes sense to me, and it seems to bring order to most of our experience if we align to such a fact or such a concept. And I think it's very helpful that we align to the order that drives the show, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But how I see it is, I still think we don't know.
I don't think we know either. but we get glimpses, and when we feel uplifted, that's a signal to us that we're on the right track.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. And that's where I am. It's like being okay with not knowing, and take those suggestions or those hints, and like you said, taking like wisdom and intuition as a guide. But I don't think I need to really know. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that
I think could be a trap. That's what my intellect could be trapped by that and needing to know. And that's why I wanted to share with you. I do think it's a very moment-to-moment thing, and we can see it on the fly if it's helpful or not, what we're doing. And the principles brought me that simplicity, for sure.
Great. Thank you, Rui. That's beautifully
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Rui. Thank you, Jack. And I do have a really good question, and we did have a hand raised, but we're out of time. So I don't know if you want to maybe write about it, but Kathy wrote, Jack, would you talk a bit about your own spiritual growth in these later years of working with the principles? Have you seen any changes within you? Are you still learning stuff?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. About 3 months ago, I had one of the biggest insights I've ever had, which was, I mean, I can't describe it in words, but basically it was, I finally saw what Sid was talking about how we're all playing the same game, the game of life. And if we're able to step back out of that game and look at the game being played, it's like that's where freedom lies. And it's so beautiful to see it. You know, and it's like when I saw it, all my senses, because I didn't have anything else on my mind, all my senses were like heightened. And it lasted about 2 hours. And then I was back to playing a game again.
Wow.
But I've gotten glimpses since.
Yeah. I've always said that this paradigm is an equal opportunity paradigm. Doesn't matter where you've been, what you've done, what you've seen. Doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a professor, homeless. We're all playing the exact same game.
And there's no limit to seeing more, ever.
Beautiful. What a wonderful way to end this. And again, can you give us? Do you know the dates that you and Gabriella are doing it, or?
No, but I will get them sent to you. And there's also a couples retreat that Laurie Carpenos and myself and Nicole Beasley are doing in the Dominican Republic in December. And there's something when I go to London. I'm doing a training for a community group that we still have some spaces open, and I will send you that too. So if you can post all of those things, are you willing to?
Of course. Are you kidding me? I think people would love to. Absolutely. That's. I'm sure people want to know where you're going to be, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll do a separate post on that and put it up with everything. I think that would be fair, and I'll put it in the YouTube video as well that we recorded. And for those that are in my VIP group, Jack will be joining us there for a little bit as well. So you know the link to that. Jack, you know the link to that? You got it?
I do remember that you sent me 2 links on the same.
Yes, so get to the second link. And for those that were here, again, thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to, at the end, there was a few that wanted to have more questions. But hopefully, we'll either you can ask him in person when you go see him, or maybe we'll have him on again. We'll figure it out from there. But in the meantime, again, thank you for everybody. Jack, you never cease to surprise me, my man. I'm serious. This is always just such an incredible experience. And thank you again for everything that you've done in our community.
Thank you, and thank you, Amir, for this great platform. And thank you to all of you out there. I wish I'd gotten to talk to every one of you.
Yeah, fair enough. And we'll see the comments and posts soon, and I'm sure you'll take a look at those, and we'll speak to everybody else soon.
Great.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.